Kalorama, a Recorded Books Highbridge imprint, presents Against the Wall, My Journey from Border Patrol Agent to Immigrant Rights Activist by Jenn Budd. Read by Jenn Budd. For my wife, Sandy, for all those seeking safety. I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Elie Wiesel, Nobel Prize Acceptance Speech, December 10, 1986. Forward. As a former senior patrol agent with USBP who finally found the right time to stand up and say enough, now is the time to say no more. DHS asylum officers must refuse, resign, strike, whatever. You cannot obey an order that violates non-refoulement and endangers those families again. I first encountered Jenn Budd on Twitter. As a journalist who disclosed my undocumented immigrant status publicly in the New York Times, my timeline does not lack for people calling out the cruelties of America's immigration system. But here was a former United States Border Patrol agent doing so, a white, Southern, gay woman no less, her voice clear and uncompromising. Define American, the nonprofit organization I founded that uses the power of narrative to humanize conversations about immigrants, reached out to Jenn about possibly working together. We called, and she responded above and beyond, signing on to be an ambassador for us, traveling to El Paso, Texas to protest inhumane detention centers with our staff, and leading a workshop on criminalization of communities and narratives for undocumented college students at a Define American event, among other things. Our collaboration led her to publish an op-ed in USA Today on anti-immigrant groups feeding Border Patrol agents misleading and false information. She writes, Mr. President, the hatred of the 2019 El Paso shooting didn't come from our city. The Border Patrol union representatives began appearing at these anti-immigrant groups' conventions and meetings after the 9/11 attacks. The groups praised them, asked them to speak, and called agents heroes. Those reps then took the racist talking points and shared them with the entire Border Patrol via their union website. Today, the union has removed the links because they do not want people to know they are associated with these racist organizations. Voices of American citizen allies from various racial and ethnic backgrounds scattered all across the country are largely missing when we talk about immigration reform, possibly out of fear of eclipsing those directly impacted. But theirs are also necessary voices that politicians need to hear in order to come up with a fair, common sense, and humane solutions to our shared immigration problem. The uncomfortable but necessary truth is there are no movements without allies. Being an ally, however, can't just be a symbolic stand in solidarity with immigrants. It's more than just overlaying a rainbow on an avatar or posting a black square on Instagram. Allyship is about taking actions that make the fight for equality a little bit easier. To be a good ally, you have to be active. Allyship is futile if no one knows about it. It's okay if you don't know much about immigration. Jenn didn't until working for Border Patrol, and her memoir will help educate you on the issue. What counts is presence. Consistent, forceful, effective presence. Allyship forces you to look outside of yourself, to claim your rightful place with dignity, while realizing that you're not the only person in the room. You never are. You never will be. Through her years-long activism, and now through this daring and soulful book, Jenn models true allyship, inspiring her readers to examine what being an ally means. Nothing about her is performative. and she doesn't sacrifice the truth for an allegiance to any specific agenda, criticizing the Trump administration's horrendous immigration policies, for example, but then also holding the Biden administration accountable for the promises it made. Her firm and fearless voice, informed by her insider expertise and personal LGBTQ plus experience, is invaluable. Her perspective on the U.S. Border Patrol is unprecedented. In the summer of 2014, when Obama was president, I traveled to McAllen, Texas, to participate in a vigil welcoming arriving Central American refugees, most of whom were children fleeing for their lives, not realizing that I would likely be unable to leave the city without papers. Border Patrol agents handcuffed me at the airport, removed my belt and shoelaces to prevent me from killing myself, and passed me around the McAllen Border Patrol station like a hot potato. I spent time in a 20-foot by 30-foot cell with about 25 inconsolable boys. I spent time in a smaller cell alone, just me and a cold cement floor, before being released to a throng of reporters. I asked a Border Patrol agent why he became one. "The benefits are solid, man," he replied. Whereas my experience with Border Patrol was surreal more than anything, Jenn's was downright harrowing. On top of xenophobic indoctrination and human rights abuses, she paints a toxic culture of sexual harassment, misogyny, homophobia, and corruption. What you are about to listen to is at once deeply personal and profoundly political, allowing us access to Jenn's very raw and vulnerable mea culpa, explaining, though never excusing, her own participation in the brutal inhumanity of America's broken and cruel immigration system, and illustrating an important through line. Immigration injustice is gender injustice, is racial injustice, is workplace injustice, and we cannot overcome any of it alone. As Maya Angelou said, "No one of us can be free until everybody's free." Jose Antonio Vargas, founder of Define American and author of Dear America, Notes from an Undocumented Citizen. Introduction. I was once a young Southern girl who believed in God and country. I went to church every Sunday, said the Pledge of Allegiance every school morning with my little hand pressed firmly against my chest. My family and friends called me Jenny. I played softball and basketball rather poorly, read Nancy Drew mysteries, watched Looney Tunes on Saturday mornings, and listened to Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown on the radio every week. My family had picnics at Montesano State Park, went to hockey games, rodeos, and the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus at the Warner Von Braun Civic Center every time they came to town. As a teenager, I rode horses and hopped onto the back of motorcycles any chance I got. I drank beer and did a little bit of weed from time to time. I liked studying French, biology, law, and going to concerts and football games. I got my first tattoo of a Black Panther on my left rib cage from a Vietnam veteran when I was just 17. As a senior in high school, you could find me at the large public library in Huntsville, Alabama, curled up in a chair until the librarians finally made me leave late at night. I often checked out a few library books for the week, stashing them in my car for those nights when my mother was too far gone for me to handle. I locked my doors, rolled my windows up, and read or did my homework just to find peace. I fell asleep listening to punk rock, jazz, or old Ike and Tina Turner cassettes I'd made on my father's stereo. I often woke with the headphones still on my head, the AA batteries of my Walkman long dead. Feeling tired and achy from sleeping in the car was a small price to pay for being safe from my mother's anger. I was once an Auburn student, an Auburn Tiger, a War Eagle. In college, I studied law with an eye towards being a civil rights attorney. Afraid to return home, fearful of admitting who I was, I chose a different path at the last minute upon graduating at the top of my class in the School of Law. I felt deeply that I had to serve my country, put on a uniform, and sacrifice some of myself for our democracy, our freedoms, our rights. It was an experience I looked forward to and trusted in because I believed that ours was an exceptional country, and I felt blessed and proud to be an American. I trusted in that and had faith in it. I was once a federal agent, a Border Patrol agent, a Social Security number to my employer, no more, no less. To Campo Station, my assigned duty station, I was a star number or a call sign. It changed as I rose in rank. My last one was Charlie 178. It is the one that sticks out in my mind the most. If you wanted my attention over the radio, you would say my star number, and I would repeat it back to you, so you knew that I was listening. If we were in the station, you likely called me Bud. First names were reserved for friends, and I had only a handful of them. If I wasn't within earshot, you likely called me bitch or cunt. Xena was only popular once they discovered I was gay, and even then, only with a handful. Bitch or cunt was more likely, and I told myself that it suited me just fine. It was the price women paid to be in law enforcement. I once wore the Border Patrol green uniform with pride, the sight of which made grown men run from me through the highest mountains of East San Diego in the middle of the night. I was proud to wear that uniform, even though it made migrant women sit still and tremble, made their children cry out in fear, and sometimes wet their pants. The one that made the white people in East County of San Diego profess their undying love and exclaim, "Thank you for your service." The same uniform that made conservative politicians ask to have their picture taken with me, because a female agent was such a rare sight. The one I thought would provide me with structure, honor, justice, righteousness, and pride. The uniform that I naively thought could protect me and keep me and my country safe. I once spoke in another language. No, I'm not speaking of the Spanglish barking orders they taught us in the academy, but the codes and acronyms used by law enforcement agencies across the country. The 10-4s, the 10-19s, EWI, LAPR, I-826, 1326, and Code 4s rolled from my mouth fluently, most comfortably back then. So much so that I sometimes forgot that not everyone understood or used them. Like binary code, it's a language that intentionally strips away any sort of humanity or sympathy. I was once a master woodworker, a custom furniture and cabinet designer and maker. Folks from all over called on me to design and hand make their kitchens, tables, Murphy beds, libraries, entertainment centers. I hand-selected the raw woods to use: sapelli, padawick, elm, walnut, ash. I knew them all by look, by feel, by the smell once the blade cut into them. I used table and panel saws, line borers, edge banders, drill presses, joiners, biscuit cutters, Craig machines, sealers, lacquers, and varnishes. It was a finished product in the end, a conclusion I'd never experienced in my other line of work. It gave me a sense of satisfaction and a feeling of worth I so desperately craved. No hurt, no pain of lifelong struggles ever entered into the transaction like before. No questions of morality or ethics to ponder. It was a simple request, a quote, a job well done. And you could have just called me Jen then, because I preferred to forget all about my other life, the federal one in green that was. I wanted to just walk away from it all as if it never happened. I kept all those memories tucked away behind a wall in my head that I had been building since I was a small child. My commemorative badge, my original black leather gun belt, a few gun holsters, a pair of handcuffs, an accommodation or two, all my excellent or outstanding evaluations, less than a handful of pictures, my nameplate that read J.H. Budd. It all sat in a plastic box under the house. It was from a person I no longer was, from a life that I was not entirely sure I understood anymore. No, I preferred to think of myself as someone who worked with her hands for a living, who got them dirty and full of splinters. I was producing a product that people needed and wanted. It was honest work, but not easy by any means. There was no security of a government agency, no easily affordable health care, no sick leave, no vacation time, no excuses for when things went wrong. It scared me to give up the security of my Border Patrol career, even though I knew that I desperately needed to leave it. I couldn't lie to myself anymore about what the agency was, what we did, what I did. I craved honest work, wanted to see if I could do it, wanted to challenge myself, even if it originally started as a necessity, a minimum wage job after I turned in my badge and gun. Woodworking started as simply somewhere to be, somewhere other than the border. My soul needed a rest, a mending from the patrol. Truth was, I'd long ago stopped believing in the Border Patrol, even while I still wore green. I was once lost in my memories. My thoughts had become mostly nightmares and daymares, bits and pieces from the past, sometimes mixed in together in the strangest of ways. Standing at the helm of a ship in my green uniform and my cowboy hat, I hear my mother complaining about my dad, my sister scared and crying in the corner, an agent yelling at me to go after the load vehicle, and the ship was now a Border Patrol sedan, faster and faster. Everyone just needed to calm down. Just calm the fuck down. It would all be okay eventually if we just slowed down, if we just took a step back and figured it out. We didn't have to chase migrants until they crashed or push them out to the desert. There had to be a better way. I was once a patient in a mental ward when it was completely dark and I thought I was done, when there was nothing left to grab onto, nothing to excuse my choices and actions, when I had nothing but a hospital gown and two hands that no longer worked. I stared at the ceiling tiles for days. That was not the end, but the beginning. It was the start of listening, of hearing, of accepting, of feeling, of loving, of seeing, of being. It was the start of my healing, of tearing down my mental walls that hid the memories I feared. It was there that I started to see my walls and how they prolonged the hurt, how I built and maintained them, how I thought they could keep me safe, how I thought they made me strong. The wall I had mentally erected to hold my family back was the first, the strongest. The second wall cornered from the first and helped keep me safe in the patrol. Only with relentless trauma and drama could I maintain them. It was only when I left the agency that I began to think that all I knew how to do was build walls. To keep them standing, I had to make everything a threat, treat everyone as a danger to my well-being and safety. The higher I went, the more wall I constructed, the less safe I felt. Not facing my problems, not experiencing and working on issues, labeling everything as a threat as the agency had drilled into me, all my training in life and the patrol, made it so that I could not recognize the real dangers from the normal, non-threatening behavior anymore. I was so angry. I hated myself most of all. There was so much on the other side of that wall just waiting to burst forth. The memories and the pain that I tried desperately not to recognize all those years never went away. It waited patiently until everything felt so big, so painful, until the walls began crumbling and I had no choice but to deal with it. I had to go back and experience it, feel it, understand it, admit it. Accepting responsibility for my actions, for who I had become, the tearing down of those walls and making myself vulnerable, facing my faults and those I have harmed, was and still is more difficult than anything I have ever endured. It is also the most meaningful and rewarding work that I have ever done. Content warning. This book describes in detail many subjects associated with trauma, rape, suicide, child abuse, racism, and police brutality. Listeners should be aware that racist terms are used to tell this story. To omit them would be dishonest. Some names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty, as this book is not written for personal revenge, but for institutional reform and accountability. If you or someone you know is suffering from suicidal ideations, please know that it does get better. Please contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline for help at 1-800-273-8255. A minimum of 10% of any profits I receive from this book will be donated to organizations assisting migrants. Part 1. Chapter 1. Game of Smiles. When I speak today about Border Patrol rape culture and how endemic it is to the agency, I remember the initiation I experienced as a member of the 288 session of the U.S. Border Patrol Academy. It was the first week of July of 1995. Late in the evening, by the time we all gathered in one of the townhomes designated for female trainees. We sat together on the 2 twin-size beds. The mattresses were thin and smelly from the hundreds of trainees who'd slept on them before us. Other women from the class sessions ahead of ours sat on the floor. There was nothing formal about it. It was not part of the curriculum, not an official act. There was nothing on the syllabus about Raping 101. The woman speaking wasn't even an agent yet herself. She was just a trainee like the rest of us, there to do the same that had been done for her when she arrived months earlier. If we made it, and that was a big if because no more than 2 women from the same class ever seemed to graduate from a Border Patrol academy, we would be obliged to do the same. She made us swear on it. In 1995, the Border Patrol Academy was held at a FLETC, pronounced FLETC, training center located on an old military base in Georgia. Being a federal law enforcement training center meant that there were other agencies training there as well. U.S. Park Police, Immigration and Naturalization Service, U.S. Customs Service, Bureau of Prisons, and many more, including some foreign police agencies. Each had its own classrooms and living quarters. Sometimes we shared. My townhome was for the immigration inspectors that worked at the ports of entry. This was pre-9/11, before Department of Homeland Security was created. And these agencies were under the old Immigration and Naturalization Service, or INS. Customs and immigration inspectors would become CBP, Customs and Border Protection, in 2003, with the Border Patrol remaining separate but falling under CBP. I was the only Border Patrol trainee in that townhome just because that's the way it worked out. They had a room, and my agency needed it. "Don't ever leave your drink alone," she said. "There's a bar," my new classmate Karen said in disbelief. "Hell yeah," she said. "You ain't gonna have a bunch of cops with no beer. They call it the gay bar because it's all guys." Our class only had 6 women out of 65 or so. We got her point. If someone offers you a drink and you hadn't had your eye on it the whole time, you best not drink that shit. They'll put one of them date rape drugs in it. Next thing y'all know, you wake up in your room wondering what happened. Y'all telling us that rape is going on this campus? That an academy full of law enforcement officials, soon-to-be law enforcement officials, has a bunch of rapists on it? Karen said, astonished. I could tell she took no shit from anyone. She was tall, thin woman who looked like she had been in a few fights. Her North Carolina accent was still strong after years of living in San Diego, California. I liked it, liked her tone, and thought being born in the same state lent some cause for us to be tight. "Yeah, that's what I'm saying." "Well, go on then," I urged. "We got class first thing." "If your instructors ask you out and you don't go, they'll fail your ass. If it's an instructor from another class, same thing. They're always talking and gossiping about us. That's just the way it is here. You got to get along. Play ball, they call it. And lots of times that means putting out. And it ain't just the instructors. Don't let the male trainees in your rooms. Don't you go near their places either, lest you looking to be raped and all." Her classmate nodded in agreement. "Why don't women report this?" Karen asked the obvious. "Who you think's coming on this base? They tell y'all not to call outside law, right?" She was right. They did say that they preferred to handle issues like disagreements or fights between agents within the agency. It was a federal academy, they said. The feds would handle any problems. That's to keep it all hush-hush. Besides, it's going to be their word against y'all, and y'all know which side they're going to take. We did, just as our sisters knew, our mamas and their sisters knew. Hell, all women knew. Like an animal knows things instinctively to survive, we all knew. I reckon that was what it was, surviving. We were no different than the generations before us. Different individuals, different stories, different cultures, sure. But it was the same story as old as time. My biggest warning to y'all is that you especially stay away from the parties on graduation nights. Instructors get together with male trainees in their classes for graduation. They target a woman at the party, drug her, get her back to their place, and play the game of smiles. They're all sitting around a table with their pants off, and they push the girl under. She's forced to give them blowjobs, and the first who smiles has to drink. If she passes out, they gang rape her. Oh, come on, I said in disbelief. I ain't lying. Why don't she just bite their dick off? Karen asked, and we laughed. This ain't no joke. Just then, several women from the immigration inspectors popped in. She's not lying to y'all. Our instructors warned us about staying away from the Border Patrol living quarters. Then they all take turns raping her. Look, y'all, women this happens to don't come forward. They're gone, like the very next day. They're ashamed. They feel like they were stupid for drinking too much, likely don't know they were drugged. Who are they going to call? They just pack up their shit and leave, she said. Y'all know women this happened to? I asked. Yeah. They're gone before we get up the next day. They call it the game of smiles. Y'all got to look out for each other. Don't let each other alone with them. This is a man's agency. They don't want us here. The only thing they'll allow you to do is file EEO. What's an EEO? Equal Employment Opportunity Complaint. You file that shit and they'll take years to investigate, and your training will stop while they sort the whole thing out. You'll be out of a job and he'll be a supervisor before they decide on your case. In our first week, they separated us. The men and the women, that is. The 6 of us females were taken to a small room. The men were left in our larger classroom that resembled a small auditorium. A center aisle split the seats into 2 groups. The instructors said they wanted to discuss hairstyles and makeup with us. This required a female agent, which intrigued me because we'd yet to encounter such a thing. Instructors said the training would be no different for us than it was for the guys, but I was curious to know if a female agent would describe it in the same way when none of the males were around. Whatever ease I felt at the sight of her quickly evaporated when she opened her mouth. She coldly read in a monotone voice from an agency memorandum that dictated the policy when it came to our hair and makeup. Off the collar, no heavy makeup, no big earrings, no looped earrings, no bracelets, and no necklaces. A small wedding ring would be allowed, as well as a discreet religious necklace. She left as quickly as she came in, taking her large looped earrings and bright red lipstick with her, and closed the door behind her. I couldn't help but feel like she hadn't wanted to give the presentation at all. Female agent camaraderie didn't exist, the instructing agents insisted. It seemed that much was true. We were all the same, they kept repeating. There were no male or female agents in the Border Patrol, only agents. Though had that been true, I failed to see why we needed to be separated in the first place. What the fuck was all that bullshit about? Karen asked. We stayed in the little room for another 30 minutes while we waited for the guys to finish whatever it was that they were talking about. Our male classmates refused to tell us what it had been after we returned to our chairs. Things had changed, though. It was more than a physical separation. We were divided in a way that we had not been during the first few days, and I could not tell what or why it was. But Karen and the 4 others could feel it, too. Whatever it was not a good feeling. It was difficult to explain. It didn't necessarily feel dangerous, but we certainly were not as welcome as we were before. What in God's name was all that about today? I asked Zarkowski as he plopped down on my bed while I folded my clothes and put them away. We had spent the time flying from San Diego to the academy getting to know each other. He was half American, half...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?